Right, yep. Hi. Right. Just fast approaching 11:15. Thanks for coming along. That's me, Tim Drewitt. Lovely job title, Product Innovator at Calidus. That means I get to work with our customers on exciting new stuff, innovation in the areas of learning management, talent management, performance management, and things in that area. I've been in digital learning for about 22 years. I had a lot more hair when I started. Always had to be slightly ahead of the curve. I started pre-internet days with CD-ROM and laser discs, and then spent some time at Vodafone bringing in mobile learning there, which is still new, still relatively new even now. And today's talk is all about virtual reality, which is something that we've heard a lot of buzz about, probably over the last 6 months in particular, since Learning Technologies. And in my talk today, I'm going to cover two bits, really. Share some of my thoughts on where we could use virtual reality for training, how we can get it into the mainstream, but also to share some interim results from a survey that we're running at the moment. And as of last night, we've had about 200 L&D professionals of organizations of all sizes have been responding to our survey, which is about your plans, your thoughts around using VR for training. So at the end, there's an opportunity for you to continue to take part in that poll, in that survey. We're giving away 3 virtual reality headsets as the prize, so you can actually start off in your own L&D teams with a set of headsets. And then in June, July, we'll share the results about what you and everybody else is saying. Right, but let's kick off. Got a lot to cover, because this is a real reality, not virtual reality. Okay, so question, to get some interaction. How many of you have some experience of using VR? And if we say that means you've actually put a headset on and had a go. Okay, good number. Probably not surprising for the audiences here. So you've got some idea. I mean, so far from those, this is a survey, I was on holiday last week, so the survey has a few people. But most people had seen it on YouTube. Some have been doing it in their spare time. A lot of them, as they are doing today, have only ever tried it at a trade show. And some actually, 80% actually do have a kit at home. And this is one of those things that the more hands-on you get with it, I think the more you understand about its potential. That's what I found anyway, and since I've started to use this. Okay, so what is virtual reality? Well, there's a number of different dimensions to it. 360 video, we believe, is a good entryway to get into virtual reality, or it could be a 3D computer-generated environment. Now, probably up to now, you've probably seen a lot of the 3D environments. We know that the US military will spend $8 billion rather, on some of their virtual reality stuff, which is very expensive. We all look at that and we go, well, that's never going to happen in our organization. But if you look at 360 video, and we've got a clip on our stand where we worked with Transport for London on a 2-minute 360 video clip in one of their stations, that's another way of virtual reality, and that makes it more accessible, I think, to all of us. We can envisage what that looks like. You very much get this close to reality, immersive, sensuous experience, and that sensuous bit is very important. You'll know you've had a good experience when you take those headphones off and you've forgotten where you are. And that comes on to this last bit of presence, and that's, I suppose, one of the new words in the vernacular we're going to have to learn. When you're in that state, when you have transported yourself away from your office, or as I was the other day in my kitchen doing some VR stuff, I was transported, I really was. When I took the glasses off, I'd forgotten where I was. I was in a state of presence. And that's one of the things you're looking for when you do VR, when you're just deciding, do I go VR, or maybe do it a different way? It's, do you want that sense of presence? Is that really important to your training objective? So it ranges on a scale. If we're giving away Google Cardboard on the other side, and you've got the Samsung. Google Cardboard, a few pounds, the Samsung, £80. This is putting virtual reality into the mainstream, I believe, because in the old days, we would have been looking at some of this stuff, which is about £500–600 a headset, with the devices and stuff, and very expensive to make, very expensive to roll out. You couldn't do anything mainstream using some of that sort of the current kit. With the cardboard and everything else, this becomes much more simple, straightforward. Through to this, which is called the VR cave, where literally all the walls are part of the experience. So you actually go in, this is airline training, so you're actually in the plane, but actually all you are, when they turn the lights off, you're just in a box. But that's very expensive, and probably not many of us are going to be going there straight away. So yes, some other characteristics, you're looking at stuff in 3D, which you do have to think about when you're designing. We'll talk about that later. Images can appear life-size. Obviously, as you're moving around, your vision is changing, and that's something to be very conscious of. This is not a 2-dimensional thing now. Everything is going around that person, the learner, and obviously responses occur in real time. So, the question we were asking, based on what we were hearing and what customers were sort of talking about, is 2016 the year of virtual reality? So we started asking first in the survey, what methods do you currently use? And you can see there classroom training, the majority of people do use that on the job and online, so probably no surprise the top three. Mobile learning, about 30% of organizations. But if we look, just 2% of the customers surveyed at that point in time were actually using VR in any way. So it's still very early days. But when we asked them, what's next on your list, I found this really interesting and quite exciting, is that VR, over half those responded so far, that was next on their sort of bucket list in terms of digital learn technologies. Above mobile learning, the previous slide, only a third of companies are doing that. That's interesting. So we seem to be getting really excited by this, which is good. So how can we use VR effectively in learning? And here are some things for me. It's clearly, and this is some of the examples of the US military, of sort of where we start on this one, you can simulate those really dangerous and risky situations, but in a controlled environment. You are immersed, things will be happening around you in real time, you're not going to be expecting it. The element of surprise often comes into VR. You can suddenly throw something at somebody, which might happen in real life. If you think about maybe a two-dimensional e-learning course, there's probably limited to what you can do in that. But with VR, if the need is there and if that experience is critical to your learners and experience, then it's possible. Obviously, you can get as close as possible to real life. There is a new phenomenon coming out, which they're actually worried about, actually, in the US military. That they're already finding this, that some soldiers have done their training in VR, and they forget what's real and what's not real. So when they're in the field, they might shoot, thinking, oh, well, they'll stop the video. They're not thinking through the consequences of their actions as much because they got so immersed in the... So I'm sure most of our day-to-day training requirements aren't going to be in there, but that's a new phenomenon that's coming out. It's got too real for some people. Offer exploration of real virtual scenarios as experience instead of a real one. This one, I blogged on this yesterday. If you go to the Alzheimer's Research UK website, last week they released a VR living with Alzheimer's. And when you put the headset on, you become an Alzheimer's sufferer. So you get totally confused and scared in a supermarket. You become paranoid out in the street. You get confused making a round of drinks for your family in the kitchen. Honestly, that's when I took it off. I was actually in my kitchen at the time, and I forgot where I was. And and you could hear the person talking, the frustrations, and that's very powerful. So if that's important for your learners, maybe in medical, we've seen that a few, diversity training. The NFL in the States, National Football League, their diversity training, their players and staff now do diversity training. They put the headset on, they start off as them, they suddenly become a black woman who is being racially abused by a white man, and apparently I've not seen it, but it's very powerful. It gets the messages home to the individual. They are taken somewhere else, they're in somebody else's shoes. We say that using visualization to simplify complex theory. Sometimes it's just better to see it and to do it and to touch it rather than have to read about it. It's been proven that it can minimize that cognitive load and make it easier to recall and retain. Because I know there's lots of theories around this that we say are myths and we dispute them, but the more active you are, the better the retention, I think. Observation. We've actually seen there's some good examples on YouTube of VR where somebody's learning a procedure. I think it's a mechanic and engineer, and because it's the coach and the trainer is watching them, it can be played back. So they're working in VR, doing something they would never be able to do in real life, but they're getting real-time feedback, or they can play it back afterwards. So you can actually use it for observational type training as well. Clearly, the usual thing is digital learning, so it could be used in lots of locations, especially if you've got the Google Cardboard. You could send those out to all your staff ahead of something that's being rolled out. And this one, I was talking to someone this morning. I think a lot of the time we say, oh, wow factor. Oh, no, it's all about the learning. It's all about the learning. There's actually research that's showing that we should actually concentrate on the wow factor. It's actually been proven, and on Friday I'm going to blog on some of the initial research we're seeing. But there's one example where they got 100% engagement in the VR session. When they took the VR session away, the engagement was about 46%. They measured every 5 minutes intervals. And they're actually saying, there is a bit of a wow factor and we should major on that. It does bring something different to the learning. And especially if engagement in training is an issue for you, this could be something to think about. On Friday, when I do blog, I'm going to give the detail behind this, but There's been some limited research. It's mostly come from the academic world, although medical training, who've been users of this for some time, have contributed to this. But it's been proven already that you get improvement in knowledge gain. More learners in studies actually improved, and those that did improve had higher improvement levels than those that didn't. Retention's higher. People were able to, about 4 weeks after, describe the processes more accurately. They could describe the concepts in their own words very accurately. And they demonstrated a greater depth of understanding than those that had gone through a more traditional route. I mentioned the attentiveness, and the US military and some others in medical, and the medical is the last one. They actually found that the surgeons trained in VR, thank God, made 40% less errors than those that didn't. So, I mean, very powerful statistic in a very high-stakes training environment. So we asked customers in the survey what they thought. And I won't go through all of this because of time, but you can see the blue and the green. There's strong agreement that VR can help support learning within the organisation. I think that's very positive. Definitely, people are saying it'll make training more realistic. That high-risk stuff that you could never really do, or not do as well as you'd like to, you'll be able to do that now. Get those more engaging learner experiences, which we know are important. And just help innovation in your. I mean, I've been a practitioner for many years, and it comes to the L&D. What's your innovation going to be for this year? What we do e-learning? Well, that's all. What are you going to do next? So then we ask the question. This tipping point. When's this going to happen? So as I said, 2% are using it now. Was it 10% the next year? But you can see the majority at some point. Not sure when. Now, hopefully. At the end of the day, hopefully you'll go away and think, well, let's maybe think about this and maybe start a bit sooner. So I know the talk was about hype and reality and stuff. There probably is a lot of hype, but I think the more you look at it, the more you explore it, the more exciting it becomes and the more realistic it becomes. That's what I've thought over the last 6 months. So is it just suitable for those high-risk examples that we see all the time in the press? Well, yes, but also no. So clearly military have been using this for many years. Emergency services have been using it for a long time. We know the airline industry, pilot simulations, that's virtual reality. Driving, there are some haulage companies in the States that now train a lot of their drivers in virtual reality cabs before they put them out in the road. Mining has been using it for some time, very dangerous, very hazardous, very difficult to run a training course underground, so they tend to use that. I'm not sure that's why the word cave came from, but they tend to use that sort of building base. Engineering, a lot of engineering training where it's hard to break open an engine or something, but you could do that in virtual reality. Medicine, definitely, I mentioned that one. Sports is using a lot, and sports is using that ability to coach somebody as well. So observe what they're doing, get all the data back, and then you can coach somebody afterwards. Recruitment, Deutsche Bahn, the German railway. If you want to join there, they've filmed about 6 or 7 virtual reality days with series. So you could be a day with a station manager, a day with a track engineer, all in virtual reality. So before you apply, you've actually experienced and sensed what it might be like to be in one of those roles. That's another interesting use. Onboarding, definitely. I've seen this where a new office building is being built, so we orientate people using virtual reality. Some of the cruise lines are using it, so before a ship comes, the first time a ship's brought into port, thousands of staff are trained in the safety positions, where to go offshore before they get on. In the past, they would have had to spend a week on the boat learning that. They can reduce that. The Royal Navy does that with submarines and new commissioned warships. So, useful for your new employee orientation. I mentioned that diversity, putting your learners in somebody else's shoes and feeling that discrimination, feeling what that diversity really means to somebody. I mean, powerful stuff. And interpersonal communications, of course. I guess adding a dimension to role play. So we asked in our survey how people are going to be using it. Obviously, top technical skills came up quite high, but health and safety as well. Some good stuff there. But I think across the board, over thirds of the respondents are finding quite a wide range of ways to use this potentially. So when would you use virtual reality? Because you're probably pondering, you've got options, limited resources, budget. Clearly, when interaction with the environment is key, so if that's key, then tick, tick. Where the live training is obviously inconvenient, impossible, or dangerous, or maybe just you could do it, but just logistically the barriers are going to be immense. Where those mistakes are costly, dangerous, We don't want to have that happen. Where a simulated model of life would be just as good as the real, if it's never going to be as good, then you're probably edging towards it still needs to be the real. So bear that in mind. And tasks where there's a lot of manual dexterity or physical movement, that's probably more where you're looking for the ones where you've got controllers, where you're interacting with something that's not actually there. Talked about the benefits of using VR for chunking. So if you've got something that's quite complex scenarios, you might think, well, let's just chunk this down into small bits and let's put that into virtual realities. Where visualization is important, so seeing, getting visual prompts. And if you look at the clip we do put visual prompts in. And one of the surveys around the learning impact says that if you put visual prompts into VR, you get better return than just leaving somebody on their own devices in a VR experience. So a bit of some early data there on giving people visual prompts. Where using graphic symbols might help alongside what they're seeing in real life. And going back to this thing about engaging, motivating, and fun, don't shy away from this at this point in time. Of course, probably in 5 years' time, we'll have lost that advantage, and we'll have to think about what the next thing will be. But for now, let's major on it. We've been working on some projects, and it's been an eye-opener. I mean, lots of us are very familiar with filming video. This is very different. So here are some of the things that we've learned over the last few months. The field of vision, if it's 360 VR, everything around you is potentially in sight. So for instance, when you're filming, the cameraman, the producer, the director can't be behind the camera. So when we filmed at Cannon Street, they were hiding behind pillars. When you look at the clip, I'm actually in shot wearing London Transport gear because I was watching to make sure nobody knocked the camera or stole it. And because there's all these passengers going, what's that? Because your camera is the center of everything. 360 audio, of course, sound is coming from everywhere. So, you'll be conscious of that. And also this idea of the camera position. Because the camera is actually the learner. When you do a 360 VR, you are that as the learner is looking around. So you have to think about that. Transitions. This is honestly, this is where you move from one scene to another. And one of the drawbacks of VR is nausea. And one of the things is make your transitions very slow. Don't suddenly teleport somebody from there to there, because you might need to have some branded sick bags or something. So make everything very slow, very gradual. And I'll skip to this viewer time. Because it's virtual, the learner needs time to look around and see stuff. If you're doing an e-learning course, you can direct people quite quickly. But if it's VR and it's all around them, where are they looking? Where do they go at any one point of time, which is your central focus point? So you need to be careful. Where do I want the person looking? How can I steer them? How can I prompt them? So they're not just going, oh, I'm lost, because being lost in virtual is not very good. Camera motion, what you'll see is a static camera. We do recommend your initial projects use a static camera. It does reduce the nausea. I know when we see sporting events on 360, that's part of the fun, of course. You want the buzz, you want all the movement and stuff. Your learners probably don't. So keep the camera static. Optimum duration, no more than 5 minutes, because if you do get that state of presence, it can be very strong, very powerful, and more than 5 minutes, people start to, suffer in different ways. Editing is very difficult at this moment in time. So you might have to do multiple takes, because trying to splice together a 360 that's come off different cameras, not the easiest of things. So you have to think about that when you're planning your shoot. You will have less opportunity afterwards to fix stuff. Okay, so what are the barriers? Well, I've talked about one already, which is the nausea and sea sickness. And we've had a few people today not throw up, but you see they take the head stuff off, you go, catch them. What the survey was saying is you've been telling us lack of knowledge about it, and I quite understand that. It's still relatively new for a lot of us, but it's fun to learn about it. And this perception of cost. I think that's going away. More and more companies are now having that capability. The hardware is coming down in cost. We're starting to see consumer-grade 360 cameras. Quality's not as good, but that's going to change. You know how fast these things go. So this will become affordable in the time frames that many of the people in the survey, this will become more affordable. There's the lack of cultural appetite, of course, scepticism, designers not being sure, and we've had to relearn how to design learning for virtual. It is very different. Measuring effectiveness, the usual one, of course. How do we measure anything, especially the stuff that's new? but not many unsure of how it could be used, and hopefully none of you will be in that bracket. So here's some of my thoughts around overcoming some of those challenges and remedies. So cost and time. This is doing your background work, your real due diligence. Is this worthy of VR? If it is, then hopefully the cost benefit will work out for you. Start with that simple format. So that 360 video, it's an easy way to get started. You can get some good results with that. Leave the other stuff for later when you're more au fait with it. And pilot with Google Cardboard. They are inexpensive. You can even make it yourself. I wouldn't bother. Or you can get one from us afterwards. And that does enable you to get this out to more people than maybe just buying some of the Oculus Rift, which is like £500 with the head joysticks, or the Samsung, which is £80. You might need that for certain things, but for day-to-day, you probably get away with the Google Cardboard and people's own smartphones. The learning design, again, make sure you've got clear objectives, and maybe my earlier slide about when you should use it, you reference that. Very much it's a collaboration with your virtual reality production company. We were learning experts. The company we work with, No VR, great partnership, because they were telling us that's never going to work. That would work in 2D, that will never work in 3D. That won't work in 360. You need to rethink that. So it's a whole new experience of designing learning in this. So find a good partner. Always think about that point of view of the learner, because that's the point that everything will radiate from. So what are they seeing? What are they doing? What are they going to be able to reach out for? And have that central focus point. And storyboard it, of course, as you would do any video, but you're obviously thinking storyboard, 360 storyboard. And when it comes to filming itself, I said be prepared for multiple takes. I did have 2 customers almost topple into the camera because they weren't looking where they were going. We obviously couldn't use that clip, that take, so you have to keep going and going. Remember, there are a few places to hide. We actually shot on tube trains, and fortunately the extras were well behaved. Nobody was peering too much in the camera, but we weren't sure if we were going to get a whole tube carriage all looking at you and stuff. So you've got to think about what's going on around you. And never forget what that learner's seeing, because you want the learner to see what you want them to see and not be distracted by maybe something they don't. And then we've got this health and psychology bit, so this fixed camera to keep that motion sickness low. Give the learner time to look around so that their brain is not being made to go out of speed with what's around them. Keep those transitions through black so people get a gradual sense of moving to the next part of your learning. And as I said, keep those sessions short. So the last word, and back to you. So can you, hands up if you think that VR will be useful for enhancing learning and development? Good, excellent, so a good majority. And the survey says, as they say, well, so far 95% when I last looked said that, so it's good. So how many of you think it's still hype? Okay. Oh, no, go for it, go for it. Thank you, honestly. Has real potential? And is the next big thing? Okay, so some wavering on that one. Well, I think the audience said the same as well. Small number thought, yeah, it's probably going to move from hype. A few saying yes, it will be the next best thing, not sure when. I think I sense that here. But a lot of people, 80% so far saying it's got full potential. Great, so that brings us to the end of this whistle-stop tour. So some actions for you. We're literally over there, so please stop by on stand 18. We've got a pocket guide to virtual reality, which covers some of the things I covered, and some hints and tips for getting started. We've actually got headsets, so you can try out the 2-hour VR experience we did with London Underground, Transport for London. If you want to take part in the survey, I've got a QR code for it there, or there's the URL. And you get a chance to win a set of 3 virtual reality headsets for your organisation. So all remains to say is thank you very much for coming on this morning, and look forward to seeing you on our stand later. Thank you.